I'm just going to tell the folks, especially in the back, because I'm last, I can read the Constitution till 10 p.m. or we can party if you give me like 14 minutes. And I have to thank you, David, for hosting this at Civic Hacks, and in my opinion, our future mayor, Andy Ginther, for being here. So moving forward, I'm just going to call him future mayor, to remind you of whose company you're in, everyone. So Andy's the star on stage, but let's talk about business building. So again, 12 to 14 minutes, and then we can party, or I will read the Constitution for the next 2.5 hours. Up to you, people in the back. All right. And I'm totally serious. Ask anyone on my team. All right, let's dive in.
So, Albert Einstein said, "I am enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is unlimited. Imagination encircles the world." What does that mean to you?
I actually have to pick a different Einstein quote. I'm a big fan because he's a smart dude. Einstein also said, the only difference between genius and stupidity is that genius has limits. So, anyway, back to the imagination thing. I think for entrepreneurs, curiosity and imagination play a big role in attempting to do something in a different way. And and I say, I love the part that imagination is more important than knowledge, because I have no idea what I'm doing, and yet here we are building a high-growth startup. So knowledge is clearly and apparently not that critical to being successful.
So take us back to Liberty, Missouri.
Yeah, so in Liberty, Missouri, I was the prom queen and the all-star quarterback. And that's why I only dated myself and didn't need any friends. So the thing about Liberty, people in the back, we're heading towards the Constitution. Already, I see you back there. This is not for my entertainment, but anyway, so in Liberty, that was the beginning of AOL chat rooms, and so I was able to connect with people that were more like me, and some creepers as well. That happens in those early days of the internet and now. But it sort of launched an era where people could find places that they fit in, if they maybe didn't have a real life context in where they fit.
So, U.S. Army, the path of most entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So I was raised in a super, super conservative Mormon household, and my mother told us, I have 5 sisters and an older brother, and my mother would say things like, "Girls, I'm raising you to be a wife and a mother." And I ended up having a wife who is a mother, but that's not what my mom really envisioned. So when my parents were trying to send me off to BYU to find a husband, the Army was actually a really liberal option. So people were like, "You're a black lesbian, why did you join the Army?" And I'm like, "Well, because the Army was like a super, super progressive option for me at the time versus rounding up a husband in Utah."
So you gotta be. How many other veteran reservists have you met that are also entrepreneurs or startups? What about that experience did you take into your startup and entrepreneurial work?
Yeah, the military is a great opportunity to sort of grow up, to learn about leadership, especially when you're particularly out of your range, and it teaches you a lot about scenario planning. And the best thing about being an entrepreneur versus being a soldier is you might make a bad decision as an entrepreneur, but you're not going to die. And so the consequences, it kind of helps maintain a lot of perspective, and veterans make phenomenal entrepreneurs, and employees, and I think that the companies that are really stepping forward to hire veterans are doing a really important thing.
So you were actually kicked out of the Army.
Yeah, but at the time, don't ask, don't tell was a thing, and I have the propensity to commit a homosexual act. So, and they say you can't be in the Army anymore, so there you go.
So you moved to Ohio State.
Yeah. So, showed up at Ohio State and studied Arabic, got a fellowship, the Huntington International Fellowship to go to Syria. I lived in Damascus and had the opportunity there to teach English and study Arabic and work in human rights. And I ended up staying there for almost 2 years. And this is before the Arab Spring. This is when Damascus and Beirut were really considered very progressive territories in the Middle East and really, really beautiful places to be and to visit. So before a lot of this September 11th and a lot of this sort of war on terror, Arabs were known as the most generous of people, and in my experiences in the Middle East, I found all of them to be that way.
So you don't strike me as somebody that fears much. When was the last time you, something intimidated you, scared you, or you worried about with respect to your business?
Oh, I thought you just meant in general. I was going to say there's a spider on the stairs.
You can share whatever you want.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm terrified of spiders. But in my business, you know, the thing that really keeps me up at night, we now, 27 months in, have 125 people. And, you know, I worry about our people feeling challenged, that they have a sense of purpose and that they have someone to go to lunch with every day. And, you know, so I worry about our people, but I'm not, you know, particularly afraid. Like, I'm not going to die, right? So it's not really a fear issue. It's just hoping very much I can do my best and serve our team and serve our community and our investors well.
You're often considered a serial entrepreneur, so take us back to your first company.
Yeah. So I grew up, my family didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, so if I wanted anything, I had to figure that out on my own. So I've been hustling in the streets for a long time. But we'll get to my first legitimate enterprise. I was about 12, and there's a different story that I'll tell if I had 2 more bourbons. I started cutting grass in the summer, and I was making pretty good money for a 12-year-old. And then I realized I could sell more jobs than I actually wanted to do. And so I hired my neighbor kids, and they made $8 an hour, which is baller money when minimum wage was $4.35. And so I sold all the jobs. I charged my clients $16 an hour, and I had 4 guys out cutting grass for me. And so I was like rolling at 13. Got my pair of Doc Martens. So
So we talked a little bit, Joe shared with us, is this entrepreneurial cycle, and if you're a serial entrepreneur, what's the cycle look like in your mindset, and how many different cycles can be happening at the same time?
yeah, so right now I'm in the midst of 2 startups, and I have ideas for new ones all the time, but my wife said no more startups. So the cycle is constrained by my wife a fair amount, but you know, Print Syndicate is really, for Mike and I, my co-founder and business partner, it's our first true attempt at an empire. And, you know, it's something that we think within the next 3 or 4 years we can build as a $100 million company, which means 5 or 6 years from launch. And, you know, and I think that that's something that matters to Columbus. I think it's something that matters to our region, to show people that it's possible to come up with an idea and start an empire, get it funded, and build it. And, you know, so I might be at this one for 10 years. We'll see how we do. You know, so I think it's always around the challenge and the interest. And so for me, I think it's really about, am I perpetually being challenged? Is this a real opportunity where I have a new puzzle every day and can surround myself with people way smarter than me and keep learning? And so I will be running this business as long as I'm learning something, I feel like we can push something, and that I'm the right leader to push us forward. There may be a moment where I'm not, and I hope I'm introspective enough to realize that, but in the meantime, we're having a lot of fun, and we've got some really great people, and it's starting to get interesting.
So we keep kind of poking around Print Syndicate, but we haven't talked about it.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Print Syndicate.
Yeah, so we launched in November of 2012, and existentially we are in the business of self-expression. Our company manifests itself in a lot of niche brands. So we have lookhuman.com, which is primarily targeted at 16 to 26-year-old girls who like to party. So, Hakuna some vodka in the back. We have Activate Apparel, which is both a fitness brand and a laziness brand. So we have single taken at the gym, don't have time for your shit. And we also have fitness, more like fitness whole pizza in my mouth. So that's, we never knew that laziness was like a whole contingency of self-expression. And then we have my favorite and most sort of personally oriented brand, and I'm going to say it properly, people always pronounce it wrong, it's AmericaMade.com, and that's right, America, and because freedom never goes out of style, and our piece de resistance for America Made, we have two really, time to get Star Spangled Hammered, or back-to-back World War IIs. So you can pick how you want to show your American pride there. And then we're continuing to launch more brands, so we just launched threadsetters.com, which is a craft pride brand, so knitting and DIY and Mod Podge and other sorts of things. And our real model is to speak to kind of social identities that people don't have an opportunity to express. So if you're a Buckeye fan, there are thousands of places to express that aspect of your social identity. If you're an introvert, we are the place that you should come to get your t-shirt that says, Introverts Unite, we're here, we're uncomfortable, and we want to go home.
Biggest mistake or greatest lesson?
I would say we make mistakes on a perpetual basis, so I won't speak to that. But I think a really powerful lesson is in attempting a business. It is really discouraging and it's really hard. And then on top of that, there are always haters and people that have opinions about what you're doing. And one of my very good friends gave me a profound piece of advice that I think about a lot. And he said, just do what you're doing, and let's see where we all land in a couple of years. And so when Mike and I were sort of in the very early stages of Print Syndicate, I was sort of struggling with some people, and now, a couple of years later, it's been fun to see where we all landed, so.
So I'd love for you to talk about the role of the co-founder and sort of the process you've taken to really identify the right fit for you.
Yeah, having a partnership is a very, very hard and very, very important thing. I think a lot of people get really motivated about an idea and then they form an LLC and they haven't thought about it. I mean, with a co-founder, it is harder to get out of than a marriage. Mike and I actually we have bigger real estate deals and have more bank accounts together than my wife and I do. And it's going to be really fucking hard if we ever want to get divorced. Even harder than to get gay divorced, which is really hard. It's a gay marriage joke, everyone. Okay. Anyway, but Mike and I went through a process to really think about whether or not we are unified, because as co-founders, we have to be in the same game. And if one co-founder wants to swing for the fence and the other chooses to be safe, that's a very, very important misalignment that can destroy business. And so you hear about co-founders fighting and that sort of thing. And a lot of times, when the money is not flowing, it's really hard, and that's one thing. And if the money is flowing, one co-founder might say, let's reinvest and build a great business, and the other co-founder might say, cocaine. You guys have all heard those stories, and that's a real thing. So for Mike and I, neither of us said cocaine, we said let's reinvest. But we really focused on values alignment, and we went through a process to determine our purpose for our company and our vision for our company. And so as we wade through it, we get beaten up by investors, we get beaten up by Tumblr trolls. We know that we are unified. Not that we always agree, we really don't. When I am right, Mike will say, well, you might be right. So that's the best I can get in terms of consensus. But I would say that sort of values alignment and really understanding the driving purpose is super critical in a partnership, and something that as we took on investors, we had the luxury, because we had built a profitable business, to select investors that also align with our values. And so our investors because we believe in paying responsible wages. I will stand up here and say it's morally wrong to pay people minimum wage and perpetuate the cycle of poverty as an employer. So in our production facility, for example, people on average make $15 an hour. We heavily subsidize health insurance. And the good news is, because we chose investors that align with our values, none of them would ever say, you could pay people more and we could all make more money. They actually totally agree with our philosophy about the type of company we want to build and the kind of impact we want to have on our community.
So on that point of investors, there's a question from Dan of how did you approach the investors who invest $4.5 million in your company? And then I would just really like you to elaborate on how you went after such top-notch A-listers that are kind of perfect for you.
So, a lot of times people ask, like, how do you raise money for a company? And someone gave Mike and I this advice a long time ago, and that was build a valuable company and you can get investors. And so, it is wildly difficult to raise money on an idea. And so if you set out and bootstrap and build something that shows promise, it's a lot easier to raise money. But the sort of beginning of the story on how we ultimately landed our round is I emailed Tony Hsieh, and I asked him apparently an interesting question, and he introduced me to the head of innovation at Zappos, Will Young. And so Will and I were scheduled for a 15-minute phone call, and in that first phone call we spoke for an hour. And so I think, the real key is, do you have something interesting to say? Is there a good story in there? And is there a real business in there? And so we went out to Las Vegas and met with the senior people at the Vegas Tech Fund and the Zappos, and they just gave us a lot of insight, and we came with a pile of questions because they know how to build a giant e-commerce business. And so we kept going back and kept asking questions and building a relationship. We weren't planning necessarily on raising money. And then they said, if you guys ever want to raise money, we're in, but we won't be the lead investor. And then Mike and I happened to be out in Las Vegas, and Tony is a big believer in collisions, and ultimately our lead investor, Scott Savitz from Data Point Capital, who's a frenemy of the Zappos guys, who's the founder of ShoeBuy. We met up, and they'd been looking for a deal to do together. So sat down with Scott. 5 months later, we had closed a round with some of the best people in e-commerce, and we really sought insight and not just money. And so I would say if you can find partners that are believers in the team, believers in the business, and can really be additive from a strategy standpoint and a connection standpoint, if you're just going for money, I would go to the bank, go to your family and friends, borrow it. But if they can bring real insight, it's super worth it.
What's your take on social enterprise, and what's your version look like?
Yeah, I think there are many problems that can be solved with social enterprise, and there are some that can, especially as we think about kind of the deepest levels of poverty and need. So there is not a social enterprise that can solve hunger or homelessness. And so for me, I think there are a couple of things. One, we see our company as a lever for impact. We have 125 people right now. We got 5 more starting in the next couple weeks, which means we have 125 volunteers. We have 125 donors. And as a profitable company, we have an opportunity to give back in really, really interesting ways. And, you know, something you asked a lot of the other guys up here is what motivates them as an entrepreneur. And for me, I want to make a giant fucking pile of money. Giant pile of money. And the reason, yeah, right? But the reason is because in the grand scheme of things, I want to work on social change. And the people that I admire the most that are having a global impact, with the exception of people like Nelson Mandela and Mother Teresa, which I am not that capable or charismatic, and so I have to go for business building because I can't go the Mother Teresa route. But you know, I think social change is super, super expensive, and people like Bill Gates can say, I want to end polio on the earth, and he can do that because he has $1 billion. And so for me, business building is not only a mechanism in real time to bring about impact through our company and our people and our profits, but also a longer game that if I happen to wind up with a giant pile of money, that I can really dive into much harder problems than growing an e-commerce business.
Sheila asks, what does a normal day look like, quote unquote, or just today?
So, normal day, I wake up in tears. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that because being an entrepreneur is so hard. It's awful. Don't do it. Anyway. Yeah, so my wife usually wakes up before I do, and then I pretend I'm sleeping, and then she brings me coffee. And my wife and I have coffee every day, so we try to spend time together. Then I do emails, and then I have meetings, so I talk to investors, I talk to the media, I do things like this, and threaten people with the Constitution if they don't listen, and you know, so basically my role is to focus on our people. So both internally, how do we handle our people, grow our business, recruit? Externally, how do we handle our customers? What's our approach on that? How do we get to the status of legendary customer service? I deal with our investors and the media, and then the really fun part of my job is to work on community relations, and then I do a lot of strategy work. So that's sort of what consumes my week. Depending on, the breakdown is different every day.
So Troy asks, as you're starting a new business, how do you recognize when you're reaching people?
When somebody besides your mom buys something, you have made it. Right? It's like when you've got a stranger that gives you money for some shit you made, that's the start. And then you see you get more strangers to give you money for the shit you make, and then you are an entrepreneur. So, yeah, it's always funny when people are like, yeah, I've got a lot of customers, and I'm like, that you are not related to. That is the point.
So Brock asks, hi Tanisha, I have a startup with existing users, but I'm at the beginning of my journey. What's the #1 piece of advice you can give to help me succeed?
I would say ask questions from the smartest people you can find and be prepared to take a beating. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to, like, they come to me for advice and I tell them what I think and then they argue with me. And I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying, like, I've seen some of this shit before, and then Mike and I hunt down people that have seen all of this shit before, and it is brutal. Like, Mike and I, in one of our board meetings, sit down and I'm like presenting our org chart and our organizational strategy. One of our new board members was like, oh my God. And, it's totally humiliating. And you have to just be able to absorb that shit, learn from it, and keep going. And, so I would say be curious, be learning, and take the beating and keep going. And you might turn out okay.
Final question from Josh. Good potential biz ideas seem to be a dime a dozen. How did you manage to go from an idea in your head at night to a real life concept? What were the first steps you took to get that ball rolling?
Yeah, I would say for all of my businesses, none of them are truly original ideas. It is really kind of examining an existing business idea and then saying, well, that's not done exactly right, and if you did it this way, it probably would work better. So Fuda was merely Groupon, but only for locally owned independent restaurants. And Print Syndicate is merely Cafe Press, but we have way better artists than the random people that upload Comic Sans to their website and better curation. And so it's really taking an existing model and tweaking it. I'm not an inventor, and I don't think you have to be an inventor to be a good entrepreneur.
Great, Tanisha Robinson.
Party!